Hey everyone. So this is our second month in our numerology series. And so this month we are looking at number two. So let's dive into it. And while I am opening it, I am getting over the remnants of a nasty cold. So if I sound funny, I do apologize. It's taking forever to shake this. So let's see how I do. All right, so number two, we're going to look at the astrology, the conjure applications, the signs and synchronicities, all of those numerological associations. So you know how to use it in your practice, whether it's divination, conjure work, astrological work. So let's just jump in. I love numbers. All right, so the number two, of course, is the first even prime number, right? Following one and preceding three. And it's fundamental in math, of course, binary computing and, defining pairs. Honestly, you're going to find two being a reoccurring theme when we talk about partnerships. There's going to be a lot of repetition today because as I go through each aspect of two, it's very, very similar. Whether you're using it in astrology, conjure, spell work, any kind of spiritual work, there's a lot of partnership value with the number two. So symbolically, two does represent partnership, duality, balance. It's oftentimes considered like the peacemaker in numerology. The number two is in the Bible. It's talked about also, yet it signifies a witness or confirmation. So significance of the number two. In math, it is the only even prime number that is the base for the binary system, which is 0 and 1, zeros and ones. And it's the first superior highly composite number. Now, I know for a lot of you that probably is like whatever, but some of you that follow me, you are engineers, you're scientists, you're physicists, so that's important to you. When we're talking about spirituality from a Christian lens, when we're looking at things like, sacred texts like the Bible, it does represent a witness. Two are better than one when we're talking about testimony or testifying from that perspective, from that lens, and of course, duality. Excuse me. Told you guys it's lingering. So examples would include like the two tablets of the Ten Commandments, right? Two witnesses and disciples that are sent out in pairs. So that's a very good representation from that lens. It's rough when it's 60 one day and 15 the next. Your body just doesn't know what to do. All right. And I take a ton of vitamins. I mean, you guys know I'm an herbologist. Of course, I'm on top of it, but sometimes there's just nothing that can counter that crazy fluctuation. All right. So in basic numerology, looking at the very base core of it, and two is associated with harmony, diplomacy, right? Cooperation. It has a very gentle nature to it. Commonly used, it's used to represent pairs, and I use like the examples of a pair of shoes, pair of eyes, twins. It is symbolic of duality, the on, off, yin, yang, or ranking. Two is important in ranking systems, of course. When I talk about famous associations, I kind of compare it to some movies, popular culture. So characters, there's a character, I don't know if you guys have ever watched the Austin Powers films, they're hilarious, but there is a character in there referred to as number two. It's a prominent recurring villain in that series, and in the Prisoner series. So the movie Codename Kids Next Door, my daughter actually watched that, so she told me that was a good one to use as an example as well. In sports, it's often used to, that top tier ranking system. And number two is excellent in any kind of sporting ranking system, right? I use the UCLA's beach volleyball team, which was ranked number two in 2026, right? And then there's common phrases, two of a kind, it takes two to tango, two-faced, two by two, killing two birds with one stone. We find two used in a lot of slang, urban language, urbanized language, I should say. So you don't see that so much with the other numbers. There's a few of them that you see that with, but not many. All right. So the number two does hold profound spiritual significance, right? As a symbol of duality. Again, balance, partnership, harmonization. It does represent the union of opposites, like light and dark, perfect example. Masculine and feminine, the yin yang. Spiritual and physical realms, often associated with cooperation, patience, sensitivity. Two encourages fostering relationships and finding inner equilibrium. So you'll see in a lot of I would say conjures that revolve around healing, repairing, and restoring connections. You probably do see a lot of little twos in sigil work or twos in activation works because it does bring in that harmonization. So, just to break it down a little bit further for you, duality and balance. Number two does signify that existence is composed of opposing yet complementary forces that create harmony, right? You need both, you need light and dark. In partnership and cooperation, the number two emphasizes the importance of working together, unity, and the necessity of witnessing or co creation. Trust and alignment. In numerology, seeing the number two frequently can indicate a need to trust the divine process, which can be challenging, right? And that you are in alignment with your path. Again, that can be challenging if we're not seeing the results of our labors. It's hard when we have to be patient for divine timing, but it's very, very important. It is part of that divine process. And number two reminds us of that. Sensitivity and diplomacy. Diplomacy. Boy. As a gentle and very intuitive number, which it is, it does encourage patience, emotional sensitivity, and a diplomatic approach to conflict. And when I'm talking about divination a little bit later in tonight's recording, I do compare it a lot of times to the moon in the tarot. The number two has very strong correspondences to the moon. In biblical or sacred significance, it represents union, such as in marriage, the testimony of two or more witnesses to confirm a truth. In many different spiritual traditions, honestly, I don't know why I'm focusing on the Bible tonight, but the number two is seen as a reflection of the divine, acting as a bridge, really. It's kind of like a bridging number, which is nice. We all need a bridge. I'm always looking for a bridge when I'm doing conjure applications between the self, others, or the self and the universe. So moving forward, let's talk about witchcraft, or really, I'm calling it witchcraft, but any kind of spiritual practice which involves nature, elements, anything outside of the standard societal norms. I don't know how to really, nowadays, things are so kind of hodgepodge. What terms do you use? But in witchcraft and numerology, the number two, again, I told you I'll be repeating a lot of words tonight. It again represents balance, duality, partnership, and harmony. So it symbolizes that union of opposites. And I use the reference here in witchcraft as the god and the goddess, which is light and dark, yin and yang, masculine, feminine. But we all oftentimes, especially if you're polytheistic, or a pagan, Norse paganism, we reference God and goddesses. This number often signifies, again, cooperation, sensitivity, and the need to align opposing forces for a balanced, peaceful existence. So again, in any kind of spiritual practice, witchcraft and the many branches of it, there's so many branches of it. You will see that number two kind of reappearing, not only in divination, but in spell work, in conjure applications. Two is used, or pairs are used. Things are doubled up. So, and again, that's for alignment. All right, I need to sip. Hang on. Whew. So, in witchcraft specifically, key aspects of the number two I want you to walk away with is, again, that duality and balance. It represents the essential polarity in nature and magic, right? Bringing together opposing forces to create stability. So, very important in spell crafting, writing out your formulas, sitting down and kind of planning out when to cast. The divine couple. Okay, so it is strongly associated with the union of the goddess and god in Wiccan tradition. And now this can be any number of pairings, but the divine couple is associated with the number two in numerology. Partnership and teamwork. It signifies that collaboration, friendship, the bonding of two forces or people to achieve a common goal. So I'm a third party caster, so I constantly am working in pairs for my clients, right? Somebody hires me to complete a cast for them that is, bringing in that collaboration, that friendly bonding of our two energies to achieve a common goal. The number two plays its part there. Energy and intuition. So oftentimes it's linked to gentle, receptive, and nurturing energy. We talked about that gentle nature of number two. The number two promotes patience. Again, keyword patience. So important when we're waiting for manifest to produce. And emotional intelligence. So intuition, right? The development of your moon. In rituals and witchcraft, that number is used to foster, again, union, partnership, or to balance out conflicting energies within a magical working. And again, many times, if you work with a coven or with a spiritual group, you will be using things in pairs, two of the same thing. And that is for, again, harmonization. All right, moving forward, if I can find there we go. So in spell casting specifically, the number two represents, again, same concept, you guys, duality, partnership, balance, harmony. It's often used in rituals to strengthen relationships, to attract love, whether it's targeted or not, and to foster cooperation, especially like in work environments or pure environments, family units that may struggle to, meet each other halfway. So it's commonly incorporated by using pairs. Again, two candles, blending ingredients, like in compounding and root work, we will use two roots or two increments of herbs, and we're making that compound if it's for a relationship. Performing rituals on days that are focused on partnership, the hours of Venus. And that's just an example. But key aspects of the number two in spellcasting magic specifically, again, you're going to see two used in, or pairs used in partnership and love works, ideal for spells aiming to connect with others, improve communication with others, or to bring two people together. Again, healing, repairing, restorative. It's a patient number. It brings in patience for that process. Balance and harmony. Again, it's used to create peace, stability, and emotional equilibrium in a situation or household. So you will see too, again, with healing in a household, if there's a lot of volatile reactive stuff going on, two is very, very important, because you're going to need not just that stabilization and that harmonization, but you're going to also, in spell work, you need to channel and route appropriately. If you are needing to target multiple individuals, you really should have a line of energy for each individual that needs to be included. So if you're only using one and there's two people, somebody's going to be shortchanged that energy. They're not going to absorb it fully. So the harmonization might not be 100%. Again, duality symbolizes the union of opposing forces, such as light and dark, or masculine and feminine again. And then practical applications, again, I'm kind of repeating myself here, but just to drive the point home, it involves using pairs of items, those two crystals, two candles in a single ritual, right? So you're not going to do separate rituals. You're going to use pairs in the one ritual. So in essence, while one represents the self and beginnings, two represents the collaboration and nurturing of that beginning. So, take that and chew on it. All right, moving on. So when we talk about divination, divination is very unique with the number two, depending on what type of divination you're doing. So I'm an old school conjure divinator. So I like cartomancy. I like tobaccomancy. I like ceromancy. I like casting of lots. Of course, I love tarot. Tarot, I think, has more wiggle room than it should for interpretation. However, when you're looking at things like cartomancy, two is very, very specific. Depending on suit, of course, and question, so those are the only variations you're going to find. But I'm looking at this kind of like in a tarot lens. So in divination, the number two symbolizes, again, same key terms here, you guys: duality, balance, partnership, harmony. It's representing the merging of opposites, like the yin and yang, light and dark. And I like this reference point, and I saved it for divination: intuition and logic. Same thing as light and dark, yin and yang. Intuition and logic are the two opposite ends of the spectrum, right? So it does signify a need for cooperation, a lot of times patience and diplomacy. It does act as a bridge between forces, or it is divining there is a need for a bridge. Again, often associated with intuition. The number two, and especially the high priestess in the tarot, right, highlights hidden knowledge and emotional sensitivity. So, if we're looking at the key aspects of the number two in divination, really focusing on tarot more than anything else, because again, old school conjure is going to be a little bit different, you guys. We have that duality and balance. Two is going to represent the existence of opposites necessary for harmony. So, it might highlight a combination of a man and a woman, day and night, active and passive energies. Partnerships and relationships symbolizes connection, cooperation, unity, reminding individuals that they are not alone. And so it's not all cups, right? It's not all wands. It's not all fire and romance and sex. Sometimes it's our working relationships. It's our relationships with our friends, with our neighbors, with our coffee barista that we see every day. So keep that in mind too, because I think we get caught up in the romanticized aspects of tarot, the cups and wands aspects of tarot, but it's so much more than that. Coins are very important, those earth-based relationships, the relationship you have with your landlord, with your dog walker, right? Those are very important relationships. Um, Moving on, sorry. The High Priestess in the tarot, of course, as the second card of the major arcana, the two represents intuition, subconscious knowledge, secrets, and the divine feminine. And I'm not going to jump too much into that because we could spend, a half hour talking about the High Priestess, but that is the two association in numerology is the High Priestess. The diplomacy and patience aspect, when a two comes up, whether it's a two of cups, two of wands, two of swords, it does emphasize a need for peace, teamwork, and careful decision making. Now, if you think about those three words, peace, teamwork, and decision making, that does represent all four suits. Okay. It does. It encompasses no matter how you interpret those cards, whether you do reversals, no matter what they're before or after in your lay, those aspects are going to hold true to some extent with each one of those twos in the tarot. So the spiritual significance here, in numerology, when we're looking at it and pairing it with divination, it does represent a path of service, sensitivity, and finding balance in life. And again, I think if you look at all four, wands, cups, swords, when you're looking at all four of the suits, that is very, it fits all four of them, whether in a reverse state, upright state, no matter how you're interpreting them, in pairs or if you're looking at a system of divination that is a little bit layered, you're going to find aspects of service, sensitivity, and finding balance amongst all the suits because of that number two affiliation. The number two frequently appears as a sign to look for connections and to bring equilibrium to conflicting areas of life. And I always think of the Two of Swords. When I see the Two of Swords, I think of being backed into a corner, feeling like maybe I'm being forced to make a decision. I don't want to make the decision because I'm not sure what's going to work best for me, but we have to do something. And so, again, that heavy influence of the two, we need to look at the connections for our situation and bring in some sort of balance and harmony to kind of eradicate that conflict and be able to choose with clarity. So it makes sense. And I know I put a little life path number JPEG down here. We're going to talk about that next. But first, there was something else I wrote about the tarot. I know there was. Let me find it. Here it is. Hang on one second. Oh my goodness. All right. So when we're talking about the High Priestess again, we're talking about that representation of intuition, the subconscious, and balance. I'm not talking a whole lot about the moon here, but I do want to add in there is very strong moon associations with the number two as well. But again, with the number two, when we're looking at the High Priestess, when we're looking at any of the suits, all four of the suits, and the moon, okay, there is that representation of inner wisdom, the subconscious mind, mystery, the divine feminine energy. Honestly, there's a little masculine in there too, but there's a lot of feminine correlation to these number placements in divination. Especially if we're looking at repair and restoration work, like with the Two of Cups, if that's in a reversed or blocked up state. Usually the repair and restoration comes through that feminine edge, that feminine energy line. Symbolism, with the High Priestess, she sits between these pillars of duality. So it's representative of, being the bridge between the light and the dark, between the male and the female, kind of acting as a mediator between conscious and unconscious aspects of our lives, right? Again, very tied into the number two. And the position, as the second card, it follows the initiate, which is the fool, and the manifestation, which is the magician. So again, the number two, I want you to think of it as a bridge. So when you see any of the suits come up that are a two, if you see the high priestess, if you see the moon, think of the bridge. What is the bridge between what you're reading? Is it two people? Is it a person in a job? Is it a living situation? Identify the bridge, and you'll be able to identify the harmonization need for that situation. All right, moving on. Whew, I really start typing in these later frames, don't I? Okay. Um, so here I'm actually talking about the life path, but I started talking about tarot first. Boy, I'm out of it today, you guys. Let's talk about the minor. I forgot I even wrote about the minors. So the number two in the minors, two of cups, two of wands, etc. Again, it signifies the balance. It signifies choices, right, that we need to make, and partnership. In numerology, that number two also represents balance, harmony, partnership, and diplomacy. Again, keywords repeating, often acting as a supportive, gentle, and intuitive peacekeeper. Again, peacemaker, ruled by the moon. And I'm bringing up here because I wanted to talk about the moon, but I wanted to make sure I express the high priestess modality. But ruled by the moon, the number two is ruled by the moon. This number does highlight emotional depth, sensitivity, cooperation, right? Individuals with this life path number, which is what we're going to talk about next, oftentimes life path number twos are very, very loyal. They're very empathetic. They seek unity. Now they do struggle, I would say, with being a bit oversensitive, or they may have a harder time kind of setting appropriate boundaries. But on a personality level, these people are very gentle. They're very tactful. They're very patient people. They're non-confrontational, right? The number two in life path work is known as kind of like a person who's a natural mediator. So their ruling influence, again, ruled by the moon, it is strongly connected to emotions, imagination, intuition. So let's talk about life path. Now, last month, when I started this numerology series, in that video, I went through how to calculate your life path number. I put some charts in the presentation. I did not do that tonight. If you need that, just go to our YouTube. I think our YouTube, our Substack, trying to think of where else I think it's just YouTube and Substack. You can go back to those our sites, and you can pull up last month's numerology video to get that chart. But moving on, we're talking about life path number twos, and not just your own chart, but maybe your significant other's chart, your mom's chart, your kid's chart. It's nice to have an idea of the persona qualities of their number. So strengths, somebody with a number two, very high emotional intelligence. Like I said, very loyal, very empathetic. They have almost like a talent for teamwork. They do very well in team structures. Weaknesses, they're prone to mood swings, I would say. They're prone to dealing with some indecisiveness, just like our two of swords. They can be a bit oversensitive. They might have a hard time saying no. Again, that's that weakness of boundaries. When we talk about the symbolism and significance of being a life path number two, there's a lot of duality that comes in with this life path number, because you're kind of representing the balance between two extremes. So what you will see sometimes, especially if you have a life path number two who has, a traumatized Saturn or Venus, right? They may be more prone to extremes emotionally, happy, ecstatic, doing somersaults 1 minute and then crying in the corner the next. So be aware of that. In partnership, there is a focus for them on bonding. They want to have lots of friends. They want to have people in their life that have mutual interests. Um, I talk about the shape here. I don't know why I put the shape here, but the shape of the two does signify a bowing nature, which can represent humility or resilience. I like to look at it from both lenses. So this kind of allows a number two life path to kind of bounce back from difficult situations, either through that resilience or through just being able to kind of humble themselves and act with humility and kind of keep their ego at bay, which can be hard to do for some life path numbers. So the two has kind of like this unique gift that they're able to bring that in when it's needed. So let's talk about compatibility. When we're looking at compatibility and life path numbers, with a two, I think they blend very well with ones, threes, fours, sevens, eights, and nines. I think they really struggle to find middle ground with five and six, especially. Okay. I think with fives and sixes, there can be a lot of unfriendly, unwelcoming energy exchanged. It can be very challenging. Um, I think people with a life path two are kind of designed to bring people together. They kind of are like these diplomats or counselors in life that foster peace, whether that's in a work environment. A lot of them are therapists, right? They're advisors, legal advisors. But their kind of purpose, I think, from an energetic level, is to bring people together, to bring in peace in maybe disruptive, chaotic environments. I think you probably find a lot of life path number twos that work in hospitals, hospice, long term care, addiction centers, runaway call centers, all these kind of challenging environments that require a very patient person who is able to work in duality, who can bring in peace and bring people together, who can stay humble and can be resilient. So it makes sense to me, right? So if we're looking at Vedic numerology, which is a little bit different, as you know, this number is associated with potential and resourcefulness, right? Kind of like the magician. In Vedic numerology, I feel like two associations are very magician-esque of the tarot, but it highlights kind of a deep emotional connection to the world around them. So again, these are like healers, emotionally, very intuitive healers, and they create, I think, opportunities. They're very resourceful. They know how to navigate things to help people access opportunities. So very similar, a little bit different, but pretty similar. All right. So, talking more about the life path number two, these individuals are kind of, again, natural diplomats. They're healers, they're peacemakers. They prioritize harmony, they prioritize cooperation, empathy, and really all aspects of life. So, their home life, their personal life, their professional life, their roles as spouse, parent, sibling. They're kind of, very, very consistent folks. They are known as being sensitive, intuitive, very nurturing caregivers. They thrive in partnerships and seek to bring balance to relationships. They often excel as mediators, counselors, or being in some sort of supporting role. So, some of the key characteristics and traits, if you're life path number two or somebody important to you is one, again, I'm going to hit some repetitive stuff here just to drive it home. Empathetic and intuitive, deeply in touch with their own emotions and those of others. So they are absorbers. They absorb from their environments, they absorb from other people. They have to be a little bit aware of that, a little bit mindful, but they are highly sensitive to their environments. And diplomatic and cooperative. They excel at bringing people together and finding common ground, preferring teamwork over solitary work. Patient and nurturing, right? These are natural supporters. They're patient, kind. They oftentimes will put other people's needs before their own, happily. Okay, no resentment. They're creative and artistic. Oftentimes they have an eye for beauty and they have a very deep appreciation for music, for poetry. The two is associated with the muses in Hellenism and Hellenic paganism. So chew on that. So let's talk about some of the challenges. Not everything is going to be ponies and rainbow farts, right? So they can be oversensitive, they can be shy. I think their high sensitivity can cause them to hold back, to kind of be shy at times or become very easily overwhelmed. They will avoid conflict, right? So in their quest for peace, they probably will avoid conflict at their own expense, right? Where they're kind of like acting as a doormat, which is not good. Um, especially if they have a traumatized Saturn or Mars or a Venus, because at some point they probably are going to explode with that extreme that we were talking about earlier. Indecisiveness, again, Two of Swords. um, they see both sides of every issue, but they're going to struggle to make quick, firm decisions, right? They're going to get stuck sometimes. They are very self-sacrificing. They risk becoming too self-sacrificing, neglecting their own needs in favor of others. And again, over time, that's very problematic. It's not, you need balance. So sometimes they can get a little off balance. So when we look at a life path number two, when we look at careers, relationships, in careers, like I said, they're going to thrive in roles that really involve helping others, healing, negotiating, so counselors, social workers, human resources, diplomatic work, honestly, massage therapists. A surprising amount of life path twos are massage therapists, which I think is beautiful. In relationships, very loyal, very devoted. They're very romantic partners. They thrive when they're in a committed relationship. But here's the thing with twos, so you need to ensure that they don't lose themselves in their partner. They need to maintain their own sense of self, their own direction. A lot of times, I don't want to say they become codependent, but they give so heavily into the partnership that they start to lose a sense of self. And that can be problematic, obviously, in the long run. With health, these are very sensitive individuals. So they are going to face health challenges related to stress. Usually it's going to be digestive problems, maybe some GERD, or hormonal imbalances, right? Where they're going to have to take maybe some supplements to make sure they keep things, harmonized there from a hormones perspective. Their life's purpose is really to cultivate peace, balance, and understanding in a very collaborative way. So, they're great folks. They really are. Very easily misunderstood and took advantage of, though. So, let's talk about signs and synchronicities. So, the number two symbolizes, again, I'm repeating myself, you guys. Let me move my mouse here. It's so irritating when it's right on my face. Balance, harmony, partnership, kind of urging you to seek inner peace and cooperation, right? Now, when you are frequently seeing the number two or a sequence like 22 or 222, this is usually interpreted as a sign of divine guidance, support, or a message that you need to trust the unfolding of a new, harmonious, or healing phase in your life. That can be hard to do because that sounds like change, right? It sounds like transition. We are kind of engineered to be afraid of that stuff. So, not to say it's going to be easy, but there is this divine message that we need to trust it. We need to let go of fear. So key themes associated with the number two in synchronicity is going to include, again, I'm going to repeat some stuff here. Let me move my face also so you guys can see what I'm reading. But balance and harmony is number one. This is a reminder when you're seeing this, reappear to you, that you need to align your inner world with your outer world. You need to restore balance maybe in your relationships. So do an evaluation. Is your inner and outer world aligned? If not, that's the message. Are your relationships balanced? If not, that's the message. Partnership and cooperation. I'm sorry, I'm going to have a coughing fit. I don't want to. I'm almost done. I'm trying to get through this without having a coughing fit. Partnership and cooperation. So seeing two or 22, 222, this is a sign usually of teamwork also. It can be diplomacy. It can be the need to work with others to achieve a goal. So again, do an evaluation. If you keep seeing two or a series of twos, ask yourself, are you stagnating some sort of team effort? Do you need to be more diplomatic? Do you need to be compromised? Do you need to compromise and meet people halfway to help achieve a group goal, a team goal? A lot of times I think of work, look at your work life. Could these two, if you're seeing two at work all day long, this is definitely a teamwork, diplomatic need for shifting to achieve a goal. If you're seeing these twos at home, it could be definitely yourself, your presentation, or your relationships. If you're seeing it just at your sister's house, obviously that relationship, right? So fine tune where you're experiencing the synchronicity so you can kind of zero in on what aspect of life it's referencing. Now, patience and trust. I feel like when we see two repeating itself over and over, especially at night or in our dreams, I think it is encouragement that we are on the right path, even if the results are not immediately visible. And again, we as human beings, we have a hard time waiting for things. Excuse me. We want what we want when we want it. And that's not how the universe works. And so a lot of times I think if you're getting ready for bed, you're getting into bed, you're about to fall asleep, or even in your dream state, that liminal space, if you're experiencing a lot of synchronicities with two, I think that is a patience and trust message. I also think it could be a divine support message. I think that is when our spiritual allies, our ancestors, are letting us know that we're protected, we're on the right road. We just need to keep walking on it, knowing that we're protected, knowing that it's right, knowing that we're safe. Now, I think duality and reflection plays a point here too. I think number two represents the connection between opposing forces, as we've talked about tonight. And it's important, for us to really be looking within to understand our external realities. I think two drives that home really well. Are we projecting, right? Are we understanding what's going on inside of us and how we might be projecting that into other people, our surroundings, our situations, or are we looking at it with a neutral lens? Two sometimes is a reflection number, and that is going to present itself in situations that require reflection. You're going to know the difference, right? Um, Sometimes we need that alignment, we need that harmonization because we're projecting and we don't realize it. We're human beings. It's going to happen, you guys. I don't care how good you are at your craft. It's just par for the course. The awareness is preparedness, right? Always being aware, always evaluating, asking yourself the hard questions every night before you go to bed. Keep yourself grounded. So when you see two in sequences, again, 202 on the clock, 222, 2222, whatever it is. I'm putting a bunch of examples out there. Again, I think this is considered kind of a gentle nudge that we need to stay patient. We need to maintain a very positive outlook, and we need to trust that our desires are going to be manifested when the time is right. And we just need to keep working our way towards them. And we need to be patient. Two is patience. If I see now, I've had a lot of root works where, I take all these photos and videos and I capture two, the number two in the flame activity sometimes. Sometimes it's really close to the wick. Sometimes it's really high up, over the peak or the crest of the flame. And the way I interpret that in sacred fireworks or like root work is the closer it is to the wick, the closer that manifestation is to coming into reality. But they need to be patient. The timing's not right. The further away from the wick it is, the higher up over the crest, I tell my clients that, listen, this has been karmically approved. It is going to manifest, but it's going to manifest on the universe's timeline when the time is right. You got to stay positive, go about your business, know that this is going to happen, but know that it's probably not going to happen tomorrow, right? Because there's some, things that need to get put into order and or into place for this to occur. So just be patient. So just kind of an example there. All right. Astrology. I'm so sorry about the coughing tonight, you guys. All right. So in astrology and numerology, when we pair it together, number two, again, represents same things, duality, harmony, partnership, emotional sensitivity. It is, again, governed by the moon, just like a life path number two. Individuals influenced by two, who these are people that are born on the 2nd, the 11th, the 20th, or 29th of a month, are very diplomatic people, very intuitive. They're very cooperative peacemakers. They excel in supporting roles. They're often, again, very sensitive, artistic, gentle. They may struggle with indecisiveness and emotional vulnerability. So par for the course, whether you're looking at this through an astrological, harmonics chart aspect, or if you're looking at pure life path numbers, like a numerology report, they're going to be very, very similar here. So in astrology, Some of the key aspects again, the moon is the ruling planet, same thing as a life path too. The symbolism is the same. It is duality, yin yang, cooperation, balance, partnership. Strengths, same, diplomatic, intuitive, empathetic, nurturing, creative, and patient. Weaknesses are the same, overly emotional, indecisive, very prone to periods of self doubt, and they can become dependent. We talked about that a little bit. I don't like using the word codependency, but or an enabler. I'm not saying number twos, they're just a little bit more predisposed to codependency and enabling. Their lucky day is Monday in astrology, right? If we're looking at a birth date, like the psychic driver number in astrology, people born on these days, the 2nd, the 11th, the 20th, or 29th, those are 2 days, okay, of any month, carry the energy of the moon. So it does make them more charming. So their glamour is usually high. They usually have more influence and persuasion, but they're also very sensitive. So it's almost like they could get up in front of the room and sell anything with their charm, but they're probably too shy to do it because they're afraid of being judged. So it's like a double-edged sword there. Now, I'm going back a little bit to life path numbers here. Those are the life path number two. Even when we kind of do a crossover, we do these mashups with astrology. If we are looking at that through the lens of a birth date sum of 20 or 11, sometimes, and I bring this up, if you're comparing those two and doing a mashup and you come to that sum of 20 or 11, sometimes that life path two is meant to learn lessons regarding partnerships, harmony, and balance. So that takes us into past life astrology, right? Takes us into Saturn, our south node, our Pluto. Do we have a soul contract or a debt to be paid, some sort of karmic debt because in our previous incarnation, we weren't great in partnerships or we brought a little disharmony, to the world or a lack of balance. And now in this lifetime, we have to make sure we're really hitting that nail on the head. It's just something to think about if you do mash up astrology and you're kind of doing some crossover readings. Those numbers 20 and 11 do have some karmic implications to it. All right, what else do I got here? All right, so career and professions. Again, they thrive in supporting roles from an astrology lens here. Again, counselors, artists, musicians, healthcare professionals, diplomats, or in the hospitality industry too. I like wedding professionals, like wedding planners, things like that. In relationship synergy, number twos excel in relationships, right? They work best behind the scenes. They're the passive partner and they bring cooperation to tense situations. They're the ones that when all hell breaks loose, they're the ones that usually fix things, right? Um, Again, the keywords very similar: diplomacy, sensitivity, intuition, cooperative, nurturing, emotional, peacemakers, and harmonious. Their nature, again, same stuff, you guys: gentle, adaptable, creative, empathetic. Again, think of the key concepts of yin yang, duality, and balance. So, those with a strong two in their chart are often considered the glue that holds either teams, like in their work life together, or relationships, their spouse, their children, their parents. They're kind of like the glue that holds these things together because of their empathetic nature. So a lot of times I do reference when I do readings for twos that I know that they're glue, right? And I'll kind of refer to them as, you're the glue. So what do you want to do? Do you want to get a dissolver and get this glue scraped off, or what do you want to do? Because they'll just stay kind of in adhesive mode forever. All right, you guys. So thank you so much once again. Everybody who is on my Patreon and a paid tier, I appreciate your support. It helps me to continue doing these EDU series. I do have my little Patreon QR code here and the main website here on the right and our Instagram here on the left. So feel free to scan those. But I just want to thank you. I hope you guys are all staying magical this March. And I think going into next month, let me close this out. I think I have to click stop sharing. Let me check. Hang on. Boy, I don't know. Here we go. Stop share. All right. So I think going into next month, then we will be hitting number three. So I'm excited about that because three is very interesting. It has some very unique aspects to it. So make sure you join us then. It's only $5 a month to join. We go through all sorts of stuff. And I'm always open for follow-up questions. Just shoot me a private email anytime, and I will respond to you as quickly as I can. So stay magical.